I saw an interesting stat. I said I was going to talk some about the NFL and college football, and I certainly am going to talk about that here in a minute. But speaking about Major League Baseball, we have only had every team has played at least 3 games. There is no team that is 3-0, and there is no team that is 0-3. That's pretty wild to think about. Already, we have no team 3-0 and no team 0-3. Now, this is the best thing that could happen for Major League Baseball because they've expanded the playoffs. And wherever your team is coming out of the gate, everybody is 1-2 or everybody is 2-1. In a 60-game season, so many of these storylines are going to be compelling because it's hard to create a lot of gap between yourself and everybody else in the league, right? So even if things have gone and been messy, right? Even if they've been difficult, this is a pretty incredible start to the season because the best team in your division is 2-1. The worst team in your division is 1-2. And so everybody's got an opportunity here. It's hard to be more than a game out of first place. This is the dream of Major League Baseball when you're expanding the playoffs. If they could get through like 40 games and everybody almost in the entire league, which seems likely, can look at the final 20 games and think, hey, if we got on a run, if we went 15-5 or 14-6, we'd make the playoffs. And almost every team, even ones that aren't very good over the course of 162 games, can have a 14-6 type run or at least a 13-7 type run. And, it's pretty wild to think about. So baseball has come back, and they have dominated, by the way, in the ratings. It's done very, very well. And so as you break this down, I think it's utterly fascinating to consider in the larger context here. Now, I wanted to talk some about not just baseball being back, but the NFL and college football both feeling like, hey, they're going to be back. Because I just think it's tremendously exciting to think about football being back. And to me, most people judge the sports season by how football goes. Right? I mean, I understand a lot of you are Major League Baseball fans, and sometimes people out there say, hey, Clay, you don't talk that much about baseball. Or some of you out there are hockey fans. You say, Clay, you don't talk a lot of hockey. Some of you are NASCAR fans. You say, hey, you don't talk a lot of NASCAR. We talk football during football season. And one of the things that's going to be actually challenging for us is after having basically nothing going on in March, April, May, and June, suddenly during football season this year, we're going to have a lot of different competing sports. And I don't know how all of that is going to shake out. Where you've got the NBA, let's say, the NBA finals are going to be head-to-head with October NFL and with October college football. Well, how is that going to shake out? I don't know. I mean, what are people going to watch? My contention is they're going to watch a lot more of the NFL and college football than they are the NBA. But is the reality going to be that all of us are just going to watch so much sports that we're going to be, the analogy I keep using is like Thanksgiving. You know how when Thanksgiving comes around and you sit down at the Thanksgiving table, and this also happens at Christmas, everybody just about out there puts on weight during Thanksgiving and Christmas because there's lots of Thanksgiving events, there's lots of Christmas events, New Year's, everybody's eating and drinking a lot more than they normally would. That's what sports is going to be like. It's almost going to be like that by the end of the week when NFL teams are already back in training camp, and you and me and everybody else out there is following like, hey, who's looking good? There's no preseason football games to watch. Hopefully guys aren't getting injured. We got the added wrinkle of the coronavirus now this year. What's the impact of that going to be? Like, there's so many different moving parts associated with that. And then you start to think about the larger competition out there. Like, the Masters is going to be played in November. How in the world am I going to decide when it's Saturday and Sunday, and usually I'm all in on college football and on the NFL? Remember the Masters, because it gets dark in Georgia at, a time when basically all of the afternoon games in the NFL would be completing themselves. How crazy is that to even think about, that you're going to have fall foliage Masters where you're flipping back and forth between the NFL and the Masters. And on Saturday, when you're usually watching a ton of college football, you'll be now sitting around watching the Masters in November. I mean, we are just headed for a without precedent sports season. And I even said this like a while back. I said, man, I don't know what the status is going to be in terms of college football crowds, but I've been saying for a long time I feel very good about college football taking place. And to me, the biggest and most interesting part of college football taking place is going to be how exactly that season's going to take place, and the fact that you could theoretically maybe go to a Georgia Bulldog game and then, which I think is going to be an evening game against Tennessee, and you could spend the earlier part of the day watching the Masters. Or you could go to the Georgia-Tennessee game if it's in the afternoon on Saturday in Athens, and then drive down to Augusta and watch the Masters final round Sunday. I mean, it's just, you could obviously drive over from South Carolina or Clemson, or you could be down in Florida watching the Gators or Florida State. Like, there are a lot of places where you could theoretically go to a Saturday college football game and then drive in or fly in, as some of the people who have even more resources have. Boom, you're pulling off one of the great double headers of all time. Now, I think in some way they're going to figure out a way to get college football fans in stadiums. I think we're going to be playing not just with with small crowds. You know, I think 10 or 20,000 people probably is going to be what ends up happening. That's my prediction, because we've already had crowds at NASCAR events in Texas and in Tennessee, and we're going to have crowds at the Indy 500, and it doesn't seem like those have been quote-unquote super spreader-like events. And so I think that's why one of the reasons why I think Oklahoma's decision to move up the start of their season is so intriguing. They're playing now on August 29th. Guys, that's just a little over 4 weeks from now. We're going to be in August by the end of this week. We're going to have NHL, NBA, and then we're going to basically be about to start training camps in the NFL this week, and then we're going to be starting training camps in college football soon. And so all these guys, and by the way, I think they should quarantine them for training camp. I don't know how many of them are going to do it, but when they're all going through the training to get ready for the start of the season, I would put them all the players, because that's when the other college kids start to come back. I would put them all in an area where I could quarantine them for the camp season of August, so that everybody's able to train. You don't have to quarantine anybody then. Like, the team by itself you're basically creating a bubble around them so that they could start the season in September. And I would even explore the idea, and I know it hasn't been talked about a lot, but I would even explore the idea of potentially having almost all college football players take remote classes in September, October, and November so they can end up playing. Now, if the outbreak starts to lessen, and I think it's going to if you look at the data suggests that we've now hit the peak in Florida, we've hit the peak in Texas, we've hit the peak in Arizona, I think we've hit the peak in California. We're going to kind of have these rolling peaks on the coronavirus. Early on, my hope was, hey, New York's going to have a bad outbreak, and maybe we won't have to worry about the rest of the country. But I think the rest of the country, the United States, is so big that I think the rest of the country is going to have their own sort of outbreak. But my hope is a month from now, as we get into September, that basically most of the country has gone through their rolling outbreaks, and we have managed to kind of corral everything, and we look more like Europe. But in the meantime, when you've got the college football guys and the NFL guys, to me, if you can limit their interaction outside of that bubble environment, to me that makes a lot of sense.